Good evening, race fans, and welcome to Podium Esports coverage of the 9th race of the fall season for the Esports Racing League presented by SimSeats. The SimSeats 70 at the Roval at Charlotte Motor Speedway in Concord, North Carolina. I am James Pite, the voice of Podium Esports, alongside Justin Prince and our producer Ryan Bauer. as always, presented by Top Flight Computers. Welcome to all of you, whether or not you're watching on Twitch or Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or any of the many places we might be for action from the Roval at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Justin Prince, this is always a wild race in real life, and I have every reason to believe that it's going to be equally as wild tonight in the sim.
Yes, indeed. Several of the drivers have been slipping and sliding around this racetrack in preparation for this race tonight. Not as much downforce compared to what drivers may have expected last year with this circuit, mind you, for the change that came in 2020 with the road course package. It's also going to be one where being able to find ways to take advantage of mistakes is going to be crucial, because it can be difficult to pass at times here. And the drivers who are the most patient and the most, consistent are the ones who usually dominate at a track such as this. You make any major mistakes tonight, James, you're getting ran over by the rest of the field.
It's an interesting point that you make, because I think that the goal might not necessarily be to take advantage of other people's mistakes so much as it is making sure that you don't make any mistakes yourself. It's principle of road racing that with double racing, you are racing the drivers around you a little bit more than you are the track. But tonight, you're racing the track as much, if not more so, than the competitors around you. So not making mistakes is going to be the smartest way to stay near the front of the field. Doesn't even matter if you have the pace or don't have the pace, for that matter. If you can be consistent, that will pay more dividends here tonight than I think it normally would a lot of the other places we would go to. And that'll be something that we'll watch for as this evening develops. We'll take a look at the point standings here momentarily before we go green flag racing. And Connor Horn took over the lead last week with a solid finish at Talladega. Colton Salick is 6 back of him, and it's Alex Bell, Nick Indelicato, and Lucas Cram all within 21 points of your leader. Presley Sora, Anthony Burrows, Tucker Minter, Nathan Rabideau, and Ryan Kendrick complete your top 10 of the point standings. They are anywhere from 23 to 58 points back, which means we're starting to get a better feel, Justin, for who actually is going to be in the title fight. And I feel like, realistically, maybe you'll see a big run from a Minter or Rabideau or a Kendrick at some point, but especially now that we've cleared Talladega, it's the top 7 that I look at that I think realistically have a chance to win this.
Yeah, and they're in the best position possible, because many of the other drivers outside that have had some great races, yes, and some wins, but they've been all over the map in consistency. When it comes to Connor Horn, outside of his DNQ that he had at the start of the season, he's been competitive for every single race, a top 10 car most of the tracks. Colton Salick's been the same case, especially towards the late going of racing. Alex Bell, it's been a recovery drive, though, from the start of the season, because he was as far back as 100 points back, James, in the standings. He had a terrible start to this season. But in the second half of the campaign, he's turned it all around, he's stayed out of trouble, and now he's in a decent spot in the point standings tonight. You can say the same for Nick Indelicato as well, for him being able to claw his way back in the standings. In other words, some of your competitors, they've had to fight some adversity as the season has progressed, for sure. Now, it's about trying to make sure they don't get any more adversity for the closing stages, including tonight.
A valid point there all around, as we'll wait to see whether or not Indelicato will put down a time. I can tell you now, though, that Connor Horn and Colton Salick are qualified right next to each other in 3rd and 4th on the board. As Blake McCandless comes around here to finish off another lap. You take a look at some of the races coming up in the schedule for the Esports Racing League fall season. Down to 4 after tonight, all on 1.5-mile short tracks, or something in between a short track and 1.5 miles if you count Phoenix. But Kansas, Texas, Martinsville, Phoenix, that's what's left after we wrap up tonight's road course race, the last road course race of the ERL fall season, JP. So it really, I think, is going to be a big turning point after this evening.
It's going to be really crucial, I think, starting tonight to get yourself dialed in, because Kansas, who knows what can happen in that race, because a lot of times the top line comes into play in that 1.5-mile racetrack. We'll see how things go for that specific attempt. Texas can be pretty wild, as we've seen with this new layout. Martinsville is a major wild card, and of course, you don't want to have to get involved in an incident, or get in an incident, I should say, that puts you in jeopardy for a point situation where you need to hope for some luck for Phoenix. In other words, you get consistent marks here and consistent amount of points starting tonight, as well as Kansas and Texas. you're in a good spot for Martinsville and Phoenix. You have a bad race mixed in there. Good luck.
We'll take a look and see where folks are in the world and where we are in the world. And you see Charlotte Motor Speedway just north of Concord, North Carolina. Not terribly far away. And lots of fun, I think, that you can have at this facility that celebrated its 60th anniversary last year.
Yes, indeed. Plenty of turns, 12 total on the iRacing layout here, of course. This is kept up to date with the current layout in real life as well, with very tight corners in the infield. The infield existing since the early years of this track. The bus stop, though, is one of the main talking points because that changed prior to the 2019 Coke race and the rear world race, where it's much more of a slower section compared to how some of the drivers first learned it to be a very quicker type of section in the very beginning. In other words, it's one where lots of potential tire spin can come into play during the corners. Being smooth on the gear shifts is going to be important. Making sure you limit mistakes, as you said, is going to be important. It's not going to be an easy one. The best passing zones, turn one, the final chicane, potentially as well, the run out from the infield off the NASCAR 1.
It is now time to bring you through the starting grid for tonight's race, where it's the Aussie Matt Danson who sets the fast qualifying time with a 1:17.779 to take the pole. Given their experience with road course racing and full-body machines, maybe not a huge surprise that the 30 is on pole ahead of Zach Novak for Richmond Raceway Esports and Lockdown Racing. Connor Horn, your points leader, starts third. Colton Salick is second in points. He'll roll off from fourth. Fifth with the 24 of Brandon McKissick. Brett Gardner begins tonight's race from the 6th spot. 7th with the 12 of Evan Rice. Lucas Cram rolls off in the 8th position. 9th belongs to the number 9 of Nick Miller. And Nathan Rabideau in the 93 starts from the 10th spot.
Admin Wasio starting 11 tonight, just a few 100s off that mark for a top 10 position. Presley Sora having to go from deeper in the field in 12th position, just recently changed organizations as of last week. Blake McCann was starting in 13th tonight, with Dylan Basin driving a special paint scheme tonight. He'll be driving the car for Anthony Alfredo in the number 21. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. Steven Rosales in 15th, Colby Wells in 16th, Henrata Zimmer, Nick Indelicato, and Ryan Kendrick. Your last starters for tonight's race. 20 total drivers ready to attack the road course to see who can survive to win after 70 minutes on the clock.
We turn to our track facts now. This is Charlotte Motor Speedway in Concord, North Carolina, but it's the Roval. It's not the 1.5-mile oval that we've become accustomed to. The Roval is 2.28 miles in length, or 3.67 kilometers. This track opened in 1959, but the Roval, as we know it, was established in 2018. There are still 24 degrees of banking in the corners on the 1.5-mile sections of the track that are used, and 5 degrees of banking on the straightaways. 17 turns, though, instead of our standard 4, to switch things up a little bit here in Charlotte. A race at default noontime for iRacing on the default day. So it is May 15th, 2020 in sim, just before 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, local time. Track temp is warm, 115 degrees Fahrenheit, paired with an air temp of 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds to the southwest at 4 miles an hour and humidity of 52%. We go for 70 minutes this evening, and we probably won't see many cautions unless we've been told if there's a track blocking wreck, which you are most likely going to find either by pit exit or over in the bus stop, JP, we are likely going green throughout this race. So not too much that I think these drivers are going to have to lean on in terms of yellows, and also not too many opportunities to save themselves if they get in trouble, which underscores the importance of not making mistakes that we talked about at the top of the broadcast.
Absolutely, especially since, in theory, it's likely going to be a one-stopper when you split it up, where you can go maybe 35 in terms of the minute distance. That should be a solid amount, where it's similar to what drivers will see in real life as well for NIS competition. But we talked about this special car tonight. The SimSeats car has a different driver this evening, James.
It does indeed have a different driver, and that's Dylan Basin, who runs the 21 machine. Not Anthony Alfredo this week. Anthony a little bit tied up and busy, but certainly not for lack of talented hands. He's got plenty of people he can call upon if he needs to have someone wheel that 21 for him.
Absolutely. And in regards to Dylan Basin, he's been running a lot of races on the oval side, in fact, here at Charlotte as well. Seen him personally actually compete for victories at the circuit. It's going to be crucial, though, on the road course that you have that mixture of speed, poise, and balance, as well as don't fry the tires. It's going to be a true test for Connor Horn, though, because with him starting side by side with a points competitor, can he get a chance to grow the gap is the biggest question, as well as can we keep up with the top two once they get off and running, since it can be difficult to keep up with consistency at sometimes at this track.
Something I think also worth noting here, your pole sitter Matt and Dancer, we talked a little bit about how the Aussies have plenty of experience with driving full-body cars on road courses. That, of course, a nod to the Australian Supercars Championship, which is the main series down in Australia, one that Dancer is very familiar with. And it's pretty much all they do. They take Holden Commodores and Ford Mustangs and run them around some of the best road courses Australia has to offer. So the whole full body car thing on a road course right in his wheelhouse. This may be one of his best chances to win this season. But we're glad you're watching coverage of the Esports Racing League, regardless of where you are or where you might be watching, as the SimSeat 70 from Charlotte Motor Speedway is underway, and Danson and Novak will race door to door into that first corner. Danson will try and maintain on the inside as Novak got a good run on the outside. He may well take the lead away from the 30 machine. They will still be side by side, but Danson couldn't get enough of a run, so Zach Novak to the point as they come through the infield and towards the back part of this infield section for the first time.
He timed it up perfectly to be able to get the launch and get the squeeze on Danson, since you can hold up the momentum if you're on the high side off the jump. But the bigger thing is, we mentioned the points battle. Horn was able to hold off Sailor just enough in the first few turns to be able to hold off for that spot. Here's a look for the 99 as he tries to claw his way back single file much of the field.
They continue to shuffle around Charlotte for this first lap, and Novak's already opened it up by maybe a car length or two on Danson, then Horn, then Sailing. It is clean, though, through the bus stop for the first time. Maybe a slight bit of concept between Adam de Blasio and Blake McCandless, but everybody still on two wheels and still headed in the right direction. But Novak looks like he'll lead the first lap.
Looking like that to be the case up towards the front, as this is a chance for him to get some practice, keep in mind, for next week, because on Tuesday, he's going to be competing for valuable points to keep in relegation marks for the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. And I'm under that philosophy of seat time is seat time. Getting as many laps as you can to learn the track, to be able to race around the track, see what works for certain types of scenarios, can help you as a competitor. This could be very crucial for his preparation for next week in this car.
We know how important it will be, and if anything, Novak going to be more of an assistant to his teammate Jimmy Mullins, who made the playoffs. Zach Novak, to be blunt, has had terrible luck in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series in 2020, so unfortunately not going to get the chance to defend his title from a season ago. But there are still plenty of things he can do as a teammate to Jimmy Mullins, who is going to be competing for the championship, and plenty that he could do, which may not want to include going off in the bus stop. We'll see what kind of time penalty he gets, but that should allow Danson to close right back up to the 90 car.
Time penalty indeed for the race leader, as that's going to really hurt Novak to the point where he lost the lead. Now, how does he bounce back is going to be crucial here, because one of the main key things, especially in that final chicane, is you hit it the wrong way on those turtles, for example. That's about a 2-second time penalty down the front straightaway. And of course, during the new build, it was released that they adjusted how the time penalties work, where you have to do it in a certain amount of time specifically. So where it's not as simple as, oh, hey, I can let it go for the lap. You have to get it done in about 30 seconds or so to make sure you're good. Essentially, you have to back it on down to avoid even more penalties.
And Novak just about ran it off into the grass, working their way around turn 6. That's that slight uphill that brings you towards the exit of the infield portion, and then bounced off the fence on the wall that splits the streets in and out of the straightaway. So Novak already having issues on this third lap of this 70-minute race and dancing down on the point the 30 car.
And drivers were struggling with some of the corner entry and exit with this car, and that is not a good combination here at the Charlotte Roval. You can see, though, in the backdrop that Salick nearly knocked the wall down to the bus stop.
He did just about knock it down to Mckissick now on the rear bumper of the 99 machine. It's pretty tight between those two. Mckissick was about 2 seconds back of Salick when they came across the stripe the last time by. This time by, that gap's going to be somewhere in the ballpark of half a second.
And we got a crash in the bus stop. Henrada around to the 37 collected Colton Zimmer and one of the Basin Racing machines at the very back of the field. Track is cleared off, though. That could have been even more disastrous if that was the mid-pack, let's say. That was around the battle for about 15th on back-ish.
And 37 of Henrada just looped it too hard on the brakes in the corner and slid off, trying to get it going in one piece, and just drove straight into the line of that number 88 machine of Colton Zimmer. So we'll see if race control has something to say about that. Usually when you have situations like that, they do chime in and say something, but nothing as it stands.
Yeah, that is an ugly one right there, where here's one of the difficult parts when it comes to the bus stop is, as you can tell, if there's a car around there, you're likely not going to see it if it's against the inside wall. Same for Henrada. He thinks, oh, coast is clear. Doesn't realize that there are two cars coming in quick that he still had to wait for.
Also comes back to the principle of just making sure that you are clear and you are mindful that when you rejoin the racing surface that you gradually merge into it instead of jumping right into the racing line, because things like that can happen sometimes, and it can be difficult when you're working with a blind corner, as you just pointed out, JP.
And now, as a result, Colton Zimmer may be in trouble for the rest of the race, not just with potential engine damage, but overheating. Kendrick got the least end of it at the very least, but give credit to Matt Danson up at the front. He's holding on pretty sturdily for now. It's the matter of how the long run pace goes. That's the main key.
And whether or not he's conserving that race car. It looks like Zach Novak is a little bit more aggressive in his line and his braking, and he was faster than Danson on the last lap. But the question will be, for how much longer can Novak keep that up? Will he burn off the tires and or beat the car and knock all the sides down before he can get to the 30 car to make a pass for the race lead?
Speaking of passes, you can see this one of the sections I was talking about, the run up to NASCAR 1. If you get towards the inside, you can maybe force a mistake, and right there, shuffle out as Evan Rice. De Blasio now up one position from his qualifying spot. That's the battle for P10.
So Blasio up into the 10th spot. Blake McCandless up to 9th after starting 13th. Good run for the number 66 machine, and a really good battle if you go back to de Blasio. Evan Rice and Nathan Rabideau side by side for position. Rice will take the spot from the 93 car. Dylan Basin is right there too in the 21 machine, not terribly far away. So good stuff here right around P10.
Yeah, this is turning out to be a really good scrap here, and it's gaining more and more cars as they fight aggressively, especially between Rabideau and Rice here in all of this. The main thing as a competitor is try and run away, because the harder you fight, the more it kills the tires. At the same time, if you're Dylan Basin, you're licking your chops and saying, keep on fighting, I want a chance to get myself in there too.
Might have the chance to claw his way back to these two. There's separation with the 98 of Presley Shaw in the mix. He sits in 13th at the moment, but it's a four-car train here. 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and I have a hunch we're going to be around this group for a good chunk of the evening, JP, because this looks like it may end up being the best battle of the evening.
Yeah, this is looking fairly even so far, but one thing to note, Zach Novak's got a problem. Last time by, coming out of the final chicane, he slammed the outside wall hard on that right front. Since then, his car has fallen off a cliff. I think he may be done here. He's pulling right into the pits.
Coming into pit road for service at least, which moves Connor Horn up into the second position, which is about the last thing that Nick and Delicado wanted to see. He's already pulled it behind the wall. He's done for the race already. But Horn, the points leader, beginning to stretch it out. Colton Salick now has extra incentive to try and run down the 67 from third.
Yeah, this is going to be even more crucial now for the point standings. Can confirm Novak now out of the race car after his collision with the wall last time by. But here's one of the main things. Brandon Mckissick is actually a fairly solid road course runner for Nexus Esports. Especially with the fixed setup, he is normally in top split action even, a top 5 race car. He seems to find a way to be able to handle the setup. He was struggling with the car though in warm-ups prior to tonight, in terms of trying to handle the grips of the corner and making sure that they got the braking marks right. Well, as you can tell, he's been able to turn around. He's only 3/10 off the race leader's pace right now.
Not terribly far away at all. There will be something that we watch over the course of the next, call it 60 minutes or so, that are left on the clock in this SimSeat 70 from Charlotte Motor Speedway. And it gives us the opportunity to remind you all that tonight's broadcast of the Esports Racing League is brought to you by SimSeats. Since 2009, SimSeats has been designing and fabricating high-quality driving simulators, including motion systems, custom fabricated parts, and complete turnkey iRacing packages, all made in the United States of America. Their customer base includes all kinds of drivers, from amateurs to professionals, and their passion for racing drives them to build better sim racing equipment. Don't limit your track time to the weekend. Visit www.sim-seats.com for more information. Danson, now that Novak has fallen out and has officially retired his car, has stretched it out to a 2.7 second lead on Connor Horn, and Horn's got about 2 seconds on Colton Salick, but Salick has his hands full with the 24 machine of Brandon Mckissick, who has been right there and was faster by a 10th than the 99 that last lap by.
Yeah, I think he was actually trying to make a move. Mckissick was just going to get the run he was looking for off NASCAR 4. Now it's about resetting that move, because that's one of the better spots we talked about. This is not the easiest place to maneuver as well, though. There's also that opportunity with it being a timed race to try and factor in, okay, when can it come in as one car comes in too hot into the bus stop. Evan Rice with the spot.
And that mixes everybody up back there. Here comes Presley Sora in the 98 on the apron, trying to get around out into Blasio, but doesn't have enough banking to support the speed, so he'll fall in line as Rice and de Blasio will continue on. And de Blasio nearly on the brakes a little bit too much there, but it's Rice up to 9th, and Blake McCandless loving seeing all of this in his rearview mirror, because that 66 car has a gap now. It's maybe, call it 2 seconds and change to Evan Rice and the 12 machine into that battle for 10th.
He's actually a couple seconds off the race leader's pace, but he's still doing decently in terms of hitting his marks. These cars, though, we talked about a moment ago, are dead even. Of course, keep in mind some of these drivers competing with memories on the line, like de Blasio, you see in that car up in front, as well for the chance for Presley Sora looking to battle for a chance to impress other organizations or show what he can do. As mentioned, he moved on from one of the organizations he's been well known to be a part of in 2020 in Indy Autosport, like last week.
And for those who aren't necessarily familiar with these teams, these organizations, and these technical alliances, JP, just talk about how the top level of iRacing works in that sense, and explain to everyone how those teams work, how you find your way into one, and what they do to help make some of these drivers faster.
Well, there's a couple key things, because there's some different types of environments, so to speak, because to be a part of the Coke environment, let's say, or be on the path towards it, it is hyper competitive first off. And I don't mean in terms of the fight like de Blasio and Sora side by side for the corner. I'm talking about in regards to, as a team, you need to be able to have that drive and energy and effort, and as well as commitment to be able to put in hours a week to be able to not just races, but also find ways to get speed, whether it's doing fixed setups where you're trying to help your fellow teammates hit your marks and be able to talk them through, okay, This is how we should do this. This is how you save the tires. This is how you can try and push. This is what happens if you try a no fuel stop, let's say, for a certain type of series. For the open side, the important part is for those teams and how they operate is you have several different drivers and several different builders. Preferably you have your drivers who know how to build setups for open competition specifically, to be able to adjust, to be able to know what's going to work to be fast. There are several different types of methods in all of that. In other words, there's different types of layouts to it, but the same formula is there, where if you want to be up at the highest level, you need to be on some of the big organizations in all of iRacing and have the right people, specifically the right people who are willing and have the time to put in the work needed to keep up the pace for the team for an entire week or an entire year or an entire decade even, potentially, to try and build off of. That's why so many teams and so many drivers end up gravitating towards one another, because of that hyper competitiveness and knowing if you've got the knowledge, you're going to be on somebody's radar.
And this is when we talk about, a lockdown racing, a great example here in the RL competition by means of Zach Novak and Jimmy Mullis and company. But when you look at some of the top teams in all of stock car racing and iRacing, you think of the slip angles and the Team Contis and the VRS Coandas and the 5 stars and so on and so forth. Those are the organizations that we need. And they're the ones who provide all the technical data and support to the drivers in the Coke Series, even though technically they are assigned to 20 different teams throughout the series. But they work more closely with the technical alliance partners than they do their teammates at points. Stewart Haas Racing, I think, might be one of the very few exceptions to that, where both team in the Coke Series and technical alliance are all aligned between Justin Bolton and Dylan Duvall. But for the most part, those technical alliances play a much bigger hand in the Coke Series than I think a lot of people realize. And likewise, if you're a driver trying to get noticed, or you're someone who you want to try and find success for, and you want to try and climb your way into a place where you might be able to go through Road to Pro or Pro to get to the Coke Series, series like this Esports Racing League are very, very good for getting your name out there and getting yourself on the lips of some of the bigger teams, as we see what happened between Lucas Cram and Blake Candice on your screen. A little bit of a love tap to move Lucas Cram out of the way, and McKinless gets the chrome horn going to go up into the 7th spot. But you think of this league, you think of Friday Night NIS that you cover on SoSpeed, JP. There are, I'd say, a handful of leagues that if you're really trying to get yourself into a good technical alliance to start working your way up the ladder of the Coach Series, you want to be in and you want to impress in order to get a shot.
Yeah, a lot of the teams, yes, look towards, say, your iRating or your statistics on how you've done in, say, your career, or even the past year, or even the past season. But a lot of the organizations look past that as well, where they're looking at the character of the driver and how they compete in series such as this, and how they handle the big stage, and how they hit their marks in terms of, do they let drivers by cleanly if they feel like they're not as quick as the cars behind them, or do they try and fight aggressively and cause major incidents, such as what we've seen with the bump and run? Do the drivers have the knowledge for strategy? Do the drivers have a solid amount of pace? Do they make a ton of mistakes? All of that comes into play on top of temperament, and James, to be able to get on the radar. There's been several cases where I've known team owners and fellow drivers have raced with and against drivers in some of the open leagues specifically, and leagues such as this on the fixed side, and in turn brought them in because they knew how they drove and liked how they drove in that respective series.
And then you start working your way up. If you find your way along one of those technical alliances, then you start working your way through the Road to Pro, and then the Pro Series, and hopefully get a spot in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, which obviously plenty of work that you can try and pull off there. But how big is it to get the support all the way through to get there? And I think maybe more importantly, how impressive is it for the 20 drivers who made it through the Road to Pro Series and ran the trucks all year long from March to September in order to qualify for what should be a 7-race series with the drivers who finished 21st or lower in the point standings from the 2020 eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. They're going to go head-to-head with the top 20 in points Road to Pro this year at the end of this year, maybe beginning of next year. We're still waiting for the pro schedule as Blake McCann gets into the lap car. It's the 37 of Robert Henrada. But can you try and quantify just how big it is to be one of the 20 that qualify from Road to Pro out of the hundreds, if not thousands of people who at least turn one lap in that series over the course of the season?
It's absolutely huge because here's the thing. It takes thousands upon thousands, not just 1,000, 2,000 to 3,000 even for some organizations. Some even put up to 5,000 laps in preparation for Road to Pro races this season because the amount of data you get for the race is very valuable to be able to hit your marks and be able to drive the racetrack, and as well be able to have that experience needed for points as well as for how you build your setup. Now, the main thing also is, as you see the dive from Evan Rice on the good move on the outside here on Lucas Cram trying to get the move done to the bus stop and does, is also for dives like that, let's say, like you're diving into a series like Road to Pro, you need the right amount of people around you, as in, you can't just go in cold turkey and say, oh, I'm just going to run X, Y, Z and hope for the best. You need to have the right support system to be able to help you get there. There's already teams preparing for the winter time right now. There are teams trying to build setups for the winter time right now. There are teams in the open trying to learn and as well use that as an opportunity to prepare for the Pro Series right now. In other words, it's going to be crucial that you get the preparation done starting right now, especially for if you want to be in the Coke Series next year, because that amount of performance can also be crucial on what teams see for the upcoming year and what happens with you and your next technical alliance, should say, and if there is a shuffle.
Especially when you consider some of the drivers who are in the Pro Series via Road to Pro and how good they're going to be. Certainly some names that are going to make the Coke drivers racing in that quake in their shoes. Alan Bose, who has experience in prior seasons, the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. Mr. DeYoung, who is quick in just about anything in the sim. Ryan Doucette and Eddie Kerner, who have been quick. Doucette won in Road to Pro this year. Kerner won the Landon Council qualifying challenge in Darlington in May. Jake Matheson was fast. Stephen Wilson won about 4 or 5 races in the middle of the summer. Derek Justice, one of the biggest streamers on Twitch. Donovan Strauss for Berkeley Esports. Seth the Merchant, inaugural champion of the Podium Esports Daytona 500. Colin Bowden, who's been quick. Garrett Maines, who has won so many races on Podium Broadcast. Vicente Salas and Jose Solis Jr., who both have run in ERL races before. It's a terrifying list of names. If you're in the bottom 20 of the Coke Series, you know that group of drivers, given their resume, they will come at you, and you cannot just sleepwalk your way through the open these next few weeks. And I think to some degree, if you feel like you're not even going to have a shot to make the top 20 in points, you almost go ahead and bin the Coke Series season and start putting your efforts into the B car to try and make sure that you can make it back to the Coke Series for 2021.
One of the better organizations set up for that is FSR, which is a part of the organizations like Ryan Lewis and a couple other drivers, for example. They do a really good job on the open side, but a really good battle is starting to form up here, James. Not to switch the conversation, this is 15 seconds back to the race lead, yes, but several drivers have elected to pit very early, surprisingly. May try a 2-stop, in fact. Now, this could be crucial on who tries an undercut, let's say, in this, as we are down to about 15 cars, making 13 on the lead lap, with several pitting this time by with their struggles.
I would almost say that's the battle done, but it's not quite done between Brandon Mckissick and Colton Salek. But Salek catches the turtle, so Mckissick has a little bit of breathing room, and it gives you a chance, I think, just to finish off your point ever so slightly about how good 5-star is and making sure the drivers are prepared for the Pro Series if they fail to lock themselves into next year's Coach Series by being one of the top 20 in points.
Yeah, that's such importance to be able to have that knowledge, and that's the thing. Some teams, they focus more so on cup car or specifically truck and then get that knowledge, and then it's a game of catch-up, so to speak. That's where having relationships with other technical alliances with the same thought processes also comes into play, James, because there are some groups who work together now, who do some open book stuff. Some are more so on the closed book side. That type of assistance can be helpful if you're in a crunch, let's say, or say you only have 1 or 2 drivers and maybe thinking, okay, do we have enough people or knowledge here? Do we need to get some outside help? There's some of those thoughts that can come into play as well. As we take a look at this fight here for 6th position, these drivers are still about a second or so off the pace of the race leaders.
Right about all of that, which the overarching point of all of that discussion, just to put a bow on it, is that if you think you can just waltz into the Coach Series, it just isn't that way. And the tree and the ladder to the Coach Series is very deep, very talented, and very well organized. And it is a commitment to try and even make it into the Coach Series, much less be a part of the Coach Series, because the technical alliances practice all the time getting ready for maybe this track, which they'll visit next Tuesday night at 9 p.m. And you can watch that broadcast on iRacing's Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube channels to see the very best of the best in stock car sim racing tackle the Roval. And we'll see if Bobby Zielinski can lock himself into the championship Ford Homestead for the 2nd straight year via victory here at the Charlotte Roval. He's been the man on road courses and may or may not have won Daytona on the road course back in August. So a very clear odds-on favorite, I think, to get the victory here next Tuesday night.
You want to hear the crazy thing, though, about that race at the Daytona road course? He felt like he could have gone even faster in the first half of that race. Yes, he won by double-digit seconds by a significant margin, but he actually was struggling with looseness in the first half of the race. Then the car came to him in terms of grip in the second half of the event. So it wasn't just as simple as, oh, hey, I'm going to go out here and run these laps. He wanted to be as fast as possible. And it's been talked about the expectations for him. And he feels more it's trying to make sure that, of course, there's the other cars in these fights for him on the racetrack that can come to play. Keep in mind, by the way, in this specific race, 5 drivers who are left in the race have already come in for pit stops. Of those, Nathan Rabideau spent 1 minute and 20 seconds in the pit lane. Everyone else is scheduled to stop about 40 seconds. Everybody else trying to get to the 35-minute mark, it looks like.
Which leaves you about 10 minutes left on the racetrack if you are still out on pit road, and that's your top 9 that have yet to come down for service. But you look on your screens and see your leader, Matt Danson, who was checked out. It's 5.5 seconds for the drive out of Melbourne to leap out ahead of this field and work for Connor Horn to do. Although, in fairness, if you're Connor Horn, given how small this field is, given how well you're running, is this just outright a points night where you're happy to cruise and take P2 points and really put yourself in a strong position when we get to Kansas and things will be a little bit more up in the air?
I think so, yes, but here's the thing. We got different strategies now for the drivers fighting for points. Saylor going for the 2-stop potentially here. 43 minutes on the clock. This is an early one.
So Salek comes down. Remember, he's 2nd in points to Connor Horn entering this evening. Salek came into tonight's race just 6 points back of that number 67 machine. So this might be his answer to try and get around the 67, who we would presume is currently on a one-stop strategy. As you ride and look just at the back of Blake McCandlish's machine, that 166 car, or 66 car, as you see on your screen, has done a very nice job picking off drivers one by one. He's gained more spots in this race than anyone else. Because of the replay and see what happened to the 9 machine, who bounced off the fence and opened the door very easily for McCandlish to come through. So McCandlish now up to 5th after starting in 13th. That's +8, and that's the hardest charging run of the night so far.
And that's one of the most difficult things with this Roval is the suspension starts to bounce as the tires wear out. In that case, it started bouncing a ton out of turn 1 from the Tom's Heartburn turn, hard to that inside wall, and just kept on ping-ponging. Now going to have to deal with significant damage the rest of the way here. Curious if this is going to hurt the motor specifically, because you can get away with it a little bit for the infield section, but it's going to kill him in NASCAR 3 and 4, specifically where you need some of that aero for this run up to the chicane.
Also, very weird incident here for the 55 of Brett Gardner. I almost wonder if there was a mechanical malfunction because the wheels on that car just turned hard to the left all of a sudden, and he just ended up in big trouble there. So we'll see if he decides to get a tow or not. But as it stands, Matt Danson still your race leader. You might see Gardner in the shot here there. You just saw that pink car flash right beneath the 30 machine. So Gardner's out of the racing line, but it looks like there's a technical issue, maybe some problem with the wheel perhaps. He's trying to get the car sorted in one piece, but it was a very strange incident for Gardner coming into NASCAR Turn 1.
Yeah, the 55 off and away after his troubles. That kind of a disaster is here, and he's still having problems. He's now skipping some of the bus stop sections. He might have to pull into the pit lane here because, as you mentioned, it was stuck hard left. I think it took him a second to get it unjammed, and now I think he's afraid of going any more turns here without potentially spinning it again here, wanting to be safe.
I think that's probably not a bad decision, just to come down pit road and get into your stall and then, just check your equipment, unplug your wheel, unplug your USB connector, just make sure that everything is okay before you go back out onto the racetrack, unless you have something like that happen again, because Gardner was just running his line with no issues whatsoever, and then all of a sudden you go back at the replay, you see it, those wheels got hard to the left, as if they went from 0 to almost 900 degrees immediately, which doesn't happen in real life. It is a pretty strong indicator of a technical issue amongst the equipment of the 55. Brandon Mckissick, in trouble there, JP.
Yeah, drivers are starting to really fall off, and one of the main things when this track first made its debut is those big turtles. Guess what? There's a thing called a snapping turtle, right? Well, these turtles are the type that snap at you. In the Tom's Heartburn turn, you're going to see, because there's a bunch of turtles on the left side of the racetrack in that corner, that if you hit them hard enough, it's going to ping pong you essentially off the springs hard, a couple times off the ground into the wall. That was the case here. Way too much turtle, hard into the right side wall. A bit more damage out of that race car, and loses some time as a result, trying to catch up to Horn. He was about 15 seconds back, now he's 21 seconds.
These are not any form of snack that smiles back. These are turtles that snap back. As you look and see what happened to Brandon Mckissick coming through turn 1. But that, incidentally, that run through that first corner, the Heartburn turn, and up into the infield, cars tend to get really tight there because you're trying to ride the edge and see that you can get as much speed as possible out of it. You're holding on the throttle more than anything else, and sometimes you end up smacking the fence either there or over off the edge of that wall right before you start making your way down the hill slightly underneath the Bank of America bridge and towards the part of the infield section.
Yeah, it can be really tight in part because of where the walls are, but as well, just that kind of stiffness just about with some of the cars, and especially the fixed set with the stock car, because it was a track originally, remember, built not so much for these stock cars. It was tailored to it and for this race, yes, a little bit, but it's one where you've seen some road course series race here. In fact, some real-world road course series racing coming here over the weekend, or in fact, for a doubleheader. It's not an easy section whatsoever, mainly because of how the bumps are and how the track is worn out and some of the elevation changes compared to, say, even the mid-2000s, where if you run that configuration of Charlotte, it was a bit more smoother and a bit more flatter, so to speak, but also had a lot more grass. So this track has changed, yes, but it's also still where you need to be right on the very edge of what limits you can go, to the point where you're using all the track limits you can, especially out of turn 2 and towards turn 3 in that infield.
You are right about that. You make a good point that we're going to see IMSA's GT cars, both the GT Le Mans and the GT Daytona classes, in action for, I believe, what is the Motul 100%, if my memory serves me correctly, makeup event. Get IMSA back on track with their schedule, and you can see that action on Saturday nights, the Motul 100% Synthetic Grand Prix at the Charlotte Roval. Green flag is going to be 8 p.m. and you'll be able to see that on NBC Sports Track Pass, the streaming service from NBC Sports in the United States of America, and IMSA.com around the rest of the world.
Very excited to see what happens there, and keep in mind the closing stages as well. It's going to be seen on various different platforms as well. It's going to be curious to see how things play out, because They used to run endurance races in the infield portion of Charlotte. Now, though, cars are entering the pit lane of Charlotte. That halfway point of the race we talked about, right on schedule.
Maybe a lap before. We're at 36 minutes and change. Matt Danson, your race leader, has come in for what should be, we think, his only pit stop of the night. The question now falls to Brandon Mckissick, who will immediately respond in kind and bring it down for service as well, as that leaves Blake McCandless and Adam de Blasio as the two drivers who have yet to come down pit road in some way, shape, or form. And if you look at the two-stop strategy, either one of Colton Salick or Lucas Cran, depending on whether or not Salick is on the two-stopper. But as it stands, Salick is the first one of the drivers who pitted more than a lap ago.
Here's the thing, though. You see Connor Horn closed up the gap. That was a huge, huge deficit, mind you, before. There was about 5 seconds of fall off, shockingly, for some of the cars, and now that is coming to play for the fight for position here. Now it's the matter of, can Horn keep up now that he's got Danson within his sights for the first time in a while?
Same thing can be said about Brandon Mckissick, who came out right in front of Dylan Basin and Adam de Blasio. Those three are within 1 second of one another. Basin and de Blasio, especially with a good run, although de Blasio will come down for service in short order. He's one of two cars that have yet to pit, the other being the 66 of Blake McCandless, who is still out there holding his own in the fourth position, just trying to extend this run a bit and go all the way to the 35-minute mark, which I think would suggest that we'll see the 66 down pit road this time by.
Yeah, and that is likely the expectation here. He's only 10 seconds back on all of this, but mentioned his fall off being fairly more significant. The interesting part's going to be the mileage, because the furthest anyone was willing to go was 25 laps. Last year, the furthest was about 27. Kind of expecting around that same ballpark. I've seen that said ballpark work before, so it's going to be a bit tightish for some of the gas, but not to the point where you're thinking, oh goodness, I got it coming in for a splash and go. We're likely going to see most of these cars make it to the end if they pit at halfway. Everybody else, including battles such as this, they're going to have to come in a second time here and lose more time, yes, but have to push on much fresher tires at the closing stages.
So McCandless has finished his service right on the nose on round 35, and that means everybody else, save for Adam de Blasio, is in. We'll see what kind of service he picks up. But as he gets his car serviced on pit road, we'll take a moment to bring you tonight's iRacing Midway Race Break, which is brought to you by iRacing, the world's premier online racing game. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat to experience today's newest form of competitive motorsport. Virtual racing, all from your home PC. Race virtually on the Australian Supercars, IndyCar, IMSA, NASCAR, the World of Outlaws, and more. Matt Danson is your leader by 1.2 seconds over Connor Horn, your points leader in the 67. He's gapped that just a little bit since they came out together on pit road. Danson's gained about 4/10 of a second on the 67 car. Colton Salick is second in points and third on the racetrack. Lucas Cram in the 44 runs in fourth. Final spot in the top five belongs to the 24 of Brandon Mckissick. Evan Rice with a solid run. He's up to sixth in this field after starting seventh. Dylan Basin holds the seventh spot. Eighth belongs to the 98 of Presley Sora. Blake McCandless, after that pit stop, now runs ninth. Nick Miller, final car in the top 10, JP.
No, we're going to be tight on fuel. Rabideau, though, having to come in for his second stop, is in 11th spot at the moment. Brett Gardner is in 12th position. That's -6 from his starting position after his technical issue. Should note, though, the car behind him is on the one stop. However, he had a massive speeding penalty that cost him a ton of time. Instead of fighting for top 10, he's going to be hoping he gets up to the end of the top 10 by the end of the race. The rest of the drivers on track: Ryan Kendricks in 14th, Colton Zimmer in 15th position. The rest of the field done for the night. Robert Henrana, Steven Rosales, Kobe Wells, Zach Novak, Nick and Delcato are all out of the race. Should note that Colton Zimmer's 88 machine will pit this time by James.
And that concludes tonight's iRacing Midway Race Break. With over 170,000 drivers on the service and over 90 laser scan tracks and cars to choose from, iRacing is your portal to the racing world. Get on track today at iRacing.com. You take a look at what Matt Danson is up to. James Pike, the voice of Podium Esports, alongside Justin Prince in the booth here with Ryan Bauer, producing tonight's broadcast of the Esports Racing League SimSeed 70, live tonight from Charlotte Motor Speedway. That 70 comes from the amount of minutes that we run this evening, and we just crossed the halfway point. We're now down to 31 minutes and at 41 seconds, about a half hour and change left of racing for these drivers, and Matt Danson looks very firmly in control. They came out. He and Connor Horn came out just a handful of laps ago, and Danson in that time has stretched his lead out by almost 1.5 seconds.
Yeah, just the rhythm just hasn't been quite as there for Horn. I don't think it's more so the tires. I think it's just where his marks are. Danson, really solid road course racer. We talked about Australia and the supercars. He races some of those races in the supercars. He's also in NIS Open, which, mind you, by the way, it's an official race. He's usually a top 10 car, if not top 15 in those races. So he's someone that likes these types of tracks, that's really thrives at these types of tracks. As long as things aren't hectic around him, guess what? It's been very calm around him, and he hasn't really had to push too hard.
Carrying on in a solid Australian tradition of drivers coming over from down under and finding success in just American racing series, not just the stock cars. We know about Marcus Ambrose and his prowess on the road courses, winner at Watkins Glen on multiple occasions. You think of a Will Power, he's had so much success in the IndyCar series, and then maybe the biggest name of all, and the one that might carry the most promise in a long, long time, heavily speculated that DJR Team Penske Scott McLaughlin is going to come over and drive an IndyCar for Roger Penske starting in 2021. And if you have not heard about the 27-year-old from New Zealand, you will want to pay attention. Already a multiple-time Supercars champion and a winner of the Bathurst 1000 for the first time last October. He's going to go for his second Bathurst 1000 in a row next weekend. You want to talk about someone who may well come in and just light things up. Watch out for McLaughlin, because if we have been keeping points in the iRacing IndyCar Challenge back in the spring, McLaughlin would have been the champion. He won the races at Barber Motorsport Park and at Indianapolis Motor Speedway to close out that 6-race slate. So not that the sim is a perfect indicator of everything that's going to happen in real life, but I do think it says a lot that McLaughlin was able to compete from Australia at his rig, and he was able to hold his own with the best of the best in IndyCar.
Yeah, he's a very solid sim racer as well, because he's raced in supercars we talked about in real life, but as well very dominant on the sim in that regard. But speaking of battles on track, though, Rice continuing to just try and chug along in this scrap and try and keep his car clean. The interesting thing is how and when Presley Sawyer has to come in again here, because he's on the same strat as Evan Rice at the moment with a much cleaner race car. Dylan Basin also on that same strategy call, separated by 1 lap distance from the 12.
So you figure, you look at some of the drivers who we would expect to come in, the Colton Salix, the Lucas Krams, the Evan Rices, the Dylan Basins, and the Nathan Rabideaus. Presley Sora in the 98 would be the man who would take advantage of all of this if they do come down and try and two-shot this, and he would jump up presumably to at least 5th, maybe 4th, depending on how Colton Salix gets up and down pit road.
And the main thing is here too, he's under pressure, Colton Salix is. So if they fight too hard with this grouping, this is going to lose both him and Mckissick some time in terms of Salix. I'm interested why Salix didn't try and let go Mckissick there, in fact. He just said over the radio, he's trying to let him go in a second here. And that's the method of, I'm scared I'm going to hit into the wall if I try and let you go at the wrong spot. So you just hold on for the time being, please, and be patient. The problem is, how long will Mckissick be patient here?
I don't know if it's going to take too long, because there's a good opportunity here once we get to the banking for Salek to step aside and let the 24 by. So either he's going to do it here, or that was just code for, I'm not actually going to let you by, but I'm going to make you think like I'm going to let you by, so that you don't necessarily feel the pressure, but I'm going to do everything I can to try and hold you up.
Yeah, and I think McKissick's getting really impatient here. He has 5 lap pressure tires. There's the mistake.
Not necessarily a mistake, but a different line. McKissick checked up early, knowing that Selick was going to run wide, and maybe a little bit of a grown horn, but the 24 makes quick work of the 99 machine, and McKissick on those fresher tires. And the more recent pit stop takes over the 3rd spot behind Connor Horn and Matt Nansen in the 30.
And the reason I said it was a mistake there, James, is he's been struggling a bit in that bus stop section. The 99 took way too much turtles there, and that's what caused that collision with the different lines even. And now they're on the other end of that wall. Still, Connor Horn, he's in a comfortable spot, just needs to keep it on the racetrack, not going to any trouble with the lap traffic, and he can come away with a solid point stay and gain a few more points in separation from the 99 machine. The main thing is, just don't lose focus. If you lose focus here, well, the turtles can get you, the tires can get you, and the grass can get you. Oh, I should say the artificial turf down the front stretch.
We can also confirm that it was technical issues with the wheel in the setup of the number 55 of Brett Gardner that has put him out of the race. So suspicions that I had right as that wreck played out in front of us confirmed on the 55. He'll finish in the 15th position as Blake McCandless was able to clear Evan Rice just a moment ago. You saw it on your screens, and the 66 car now up to 7th again, continuing to charge on the one-stop strategy.
Yeah, again, I like the one-stop strategy because here's the thing. It's been shown time and time again recently, James, that in the past you can make up some time with the two-stop if you're a fast driver. Here's the thing. On the one-stop, you have 40 less seconds in the pit lane. Yes, there's the risk of the fall-off in the final 5 laps, the cliffing that came into play with the V6 tire model in 2019 on forward. With the V7 tire model, that flipped to where you wanted to be able to drive the two-stop in a lot of situations. If you struggled with tire saving, in comes Cram and Rice for their scheduled stops in that reference.
Was about to say, speaking of two stops, here come 2 drivers who are on the two-stop strategy to get their final calls down pit road for the evening. So Cram and Rice come in there 8th and 9th as it stands, and you would assume that Cram will come out in 8th and Rice will follow in 9th unless we see a wild form of pit stop or so, as those 2 continue to shuffle down pit road. Evan Rice with tires and wheels on, and Lucas Graham has pulled it behind the wall. So Graham is done for the evening, and Matt Danson continues to lead, but Rice will now gain that spot. Nick Miller will now jump into 10th, and Aaron Blasio is the top 10.
De Blasio, though, crashing the bus stop, and another crash for Rabideau now in the same bus stop section. Lost him another spot on the racetrack. A couple different drivers now dropping off. Miller and Cram now done. Rabideau way too fast in the bus stop and hits the turtles for good measure.
Miller just hit the wall coming down pit road. He was too hot on pit entry and just finished himself off there. So Miller now done. So that would move Ryan Kendrick up to 11th eventually, and then Colton Zimmer would go up into 12th once Miller falls off with Cram.
We talked about the undercut from Colton Salick. He just said that's unfortunate for me. He can't make it on that one stop. He pit too early to try and stretch it.
You figured it might be an issue with Salick, so here's your second stop, and that's going to be big so far as the points are concerned. Not excessively huge, given the small size of the field. It's not a killer like it would be if it were an oval race, but still, we want to talk about every point mattering and how things could play at the end of this. Watch this moment if we come back to Phoenix, and it might be a 7 or 8 point gap between Salick and Horn, because a lot of that could come back to this moment right here.
It's going to get even worse now because Colton Salick has a 40-second hold after that stop because he sped and smacked the outside wall coming into the pit lane, in fact. So this has just turned from bad to worst. He's now 1 lap down the racetrack, 7 cars in the lead lap. He's going to need to claw back and get up to drivers like Rice and Dylan Basin for a shot to recover some points. But the thing is, that's much easier said than done. Speeding is confirmation for the pit lane.
So Salick is just now coming on to the backside of the infield portion. Rice is over in turn 2. It's almost 25 seconds between the 12 and the 99 pole position. So Salek, barring the unexpected, may well be locked here into 8th because you assume everybody else in front of him is probably done with pit stops. The only man behind him that would come down, Nathan Rabideau in the 93. So not much to be gaining from pit stops now. This is about running it until the very end, it looks like.
The main thing is, yeah, absolutely, 100%. If you made that one stop at the right time, you're in a good spot. If you're Colton Salek, however, everything's imploding because Dylan Basin pits. But the problem is, Colton Salek just missed the bus stop at the end of the racetrack. Compare that to Danson and take a look at the hands, nice and smooth on the inputs. Compare that to Salek's movements, and it's not quite as smooth. In fact, he's trying to wrestle with the race car. With the Dylan Basin, in fact, you see now here's Colton Salek.
Yeah, Salek there. A pretty wheel to be sure. And plenty of work to do inside the cockpit. You get a little bit more of the gyro feel with these cars and just how tricky it can be to maintain these things when they've got the road course package and they have so much power. Remember that these cars got the 750 horsepower package on the road courses that was last run in 2018, and it certainly has changed the way we've run road courses in 2020.
100% has, because it's back to low downforce where you need to let the car roll a bit more. Before, depending on how the setup was, you can actually throw it in. As in, you can throw it in hard if you had a more looser or lighter suspension jams. More tighter, you had to be very careful, but also have the confidence to be able to send it in with a decent amount of pace. Now, it's more balanced where you roll off the gas in sections like right here, then back onto the gas where you need to be more careful because you just don't have that big blade to help you with the downforce.
Well, there's a first we've seen tonight. Matt Danson being passed. Hasn't happened since Zach Novak did it at the very beginning of this race. But Dylan Basin just getting back on the lead lap there. That's not for position. Basin running in the 7th spot with the fresher tires. So not a huge shock to see him already running off the front end of the 30 machine. But it's Danson who has the race lead over Connor Horn, who's about 6 seconds back. And then big gaps here back to Brandon Mckissick, to Presley Sora, to Evan Rice, Dylan Basin. They really have spread themselves out properly now.
The Charlotte Roval is what I can say. It can spread out like this for the longer runs, but the main thing again is just the skill differences, as well as some of the adaptability. Some of these drivers run a lot of road courses. Danson, 3,400 in terms of the IRI rating numbers we talked about a bit before, but other drivers, they don't even have the rookie license completed yet, let alone a D license or a C license. This is a big learning curve to try and make sure you know how to drive these tracks when you aren't in a stock car, mind you, let alone trying to manhandle a much heavier car compared to, say, a Mazda Miata or even a GT3.
Heavier car, more power, less downforce. The general effect is that you just slide around these courses like you're on dirt, almost. At least when you compare these cars.
Hold on 1 second. Connor Horn has to come in. And this is going to be intriguing.
I wonder if this might just be a gap play, that he's got enough time to do it. He may as well. There's not really much he's going to lose here. It doesn't necessarily feel like he's got the speed to go catch Matt Danson. And he had about 25 seconds over Brandon Mckissick, which is about your delta on pit road. So I don't necessarily think you lose too terribly much. Although McKissick has cleared the 67 machine, so Horn now back to 3rd, albeit not by much.
Wonder if he felt like it was going to be a bit more tighter than he thought on the fuel, because we talked about 27, 28, 29 laps have seen some drivers get to. The farthest we've seen is about 26. He would have needed to make it to that 27. There's a chance here some of these one-stoppers might have to try and go for that safety we just talked about. This is going to be tough.
And immediately you look at Blake McCandless, he's the one, maybe Adam de Blasio too. Those two were the last to come in of the one-stoppers. So we'll keep our eyes peeled and see what.
Danson's in.
Danson coming in too, so All right, well, I guess that explains that one. So maybe does McCandless get the benefit if he nails this? If he got his strategy perfect and was able to go 35 and 35, McCandless might be able to stretch this and make good use of his one-stop strategy here.
I think he can get a top 5 maybe, but he's way too far back from Connor Horn, specifically on much fresher tire. For Horn's fresher tires, I should say, at the moment. McKissick, I'm curious how long he tries to push it now, because I'm surprised how many of these cars have tried this call. This is going to be really intriguing again, because this closes up the gap just like that again for the race lead. In fact, McKissick just about took it away from Danson and just about got to his outside.
Just about indeed. Remember, McKissick has stayed out. He does not have the fresh tires of a Connor Horn. He does not have the fresh tires of Matt Danson, who will clear Colton Zimmer with ease. And Horn was able to get around McKissick pretty quickly, too. So it's back to these two, as Colton Zimmer will step out of the way. And it is Horn v. Danson here at the Roval in the final 15 minutes.
I think Danson's in the good spot because he's gained more time compared to the last pit stop sequence, but the main telling sign is, again, if traffic comes into play, if there's any mistakes that come in on a bit colder tires here, going to be very difficult, I think, this stint, if you don't get by, say, de Blasio in quickly. You time this up wrong, you're in trouble. Thankfully, de Blasio able to time it up perfectly to let him on by with no trouble.
Does not want to be the reason that Matt Danson loses out on what would be a first career victory in ERL competition. He's right on board with Connor Horn in the 67, and you see Danson, the second car on screen further up the road, and then de Blasio in the mix here as they come through the entrance to the infield portion and work their way around this fun little turn. Call it what? 1, 2, 3, 4 section, Hartburg turn included all the way to the back, almost on top of the back straightaway of the oval before you come up the hill through 5 and 6, like you see Danson do here, and then down a hill just a little bit to 7. It sort of dips underneath you, and then you really have to ride the throttle carefully to get through turn 8. You can't quite go flat out there, even though you want to.
You try going flat out, you're going straight into the safer barrier, for one, because there's that massive elevation difference with the banking, but two, just the nature of trying to time it up as well, the gearing, because some drivers like to just use the brakes and then shift on down, but the preference is using something called engine braking. As in, when you shift down properly in the right gearing range, you'll see on the revs, when you're slowing down, it'll help you slow down naturally as a driver if you've got your brake bias set up right. And as long as you get it nailed to the right gearing, you can hit the marks cleanly and consistently. Some drivers have talked about, say, second gear for much of the infield, for example. You can go up to third gear in some sections of this track. Some have even gone, especially when this track made its debut, up to fourth gear through NASCAR 3 and 4, trying to carry speed. But that, remember, was where you can carry more speed on the bus stop. Not so much now since last year with that bigger chicane.
Well, now the interesting question in that case becomes, well, what are the right RPMs to try and shift that? You certainly can use the brake to slow down if you want to, but there are a lot of cases here, Charlotte, in particular, like you just noted, where it's more about where you shift to help get the car slow down. Yep. So if you're trying to figure that out, what's generally the right RPM range?
My preference for RPM range is usually 6,000 or 6,200. Any higher than that, you risk over-revving the engine. And you also have to remember, you over-rev that engine, you're likely popping it because you're right on the set rev limiter. There's also the chance of wheel hop as well, that you can come into play where you mistime it, where you shift a little bit too high with that rev, it's going to cause tons and tons of hopping under the braking zone and cause you to miss the corner. We've seen a couple cases already tonight where several drivers have completely locked it up with wheel hop and just completely blew the backstretch bus stop, for example. In other words, you need to be right on your marks for that and very careful in terms of your precision for the shifting. You time it up wrong, you're likely going off the tires or the safer barriers.
Last thing you want to do is leave yourself in trouble in that way. Matt Hansen is still your leader, but just over 10 minutes left to go here in this SimSeed 70 at Charlotte Motor Speedway. And while we have a lull in the action, we'll remind you of some of the events coming up in the world of iRacing throughout the next week. More road course racing on Friday night for you in the world of Podium Esports is the Porsche Club of America Sim Racing Series 5. Will tackle its 6th round of its 8-race season from the Suzuka circuit. The first ever race for PCA Sim Racing in Asia will come your way at 7 p.m. Eastern this Friday, October 9th. You can find all the action on the PCA Sim Racing YouTube channel. Then, Monday night, the Sim 500 Trans Service Cup Series will join us at the Roval at Charlotte Motor Speedway for the Nemesis Lab 114. You'll hear a Blake McKissick currently riding in 4th in this race. He'll be on the call for that event at 9 p.m. Eastern next Monday night, October 12th, the Podium Esports Twitch channel before Tuesday night. The playoffs begin for the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. We're at the Roval at Charlotte Motor Speedway. That broadcast you can find next Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, October 13th on iRacing's Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube channels. So much to talk about when we get to the Roval next week, JP. And we've already mentioned, of course, Bobby Zielinski, but plenty, I think, to be said about some of the drivers who are going to compete in the playoffs outside of Zielinski, too.
Yeah, I'm curious about drivers like Ryan Luza and how they compete. Blake Reynolds talked about how much he loved the Daytona road course. I think he might have a decent shot at getting in the top 5 run there. Remember, with the different number back last year, it was that he was fairly consistent at that racetrack. I think as well, though, it's going to be a challenge for a couple of the others who were basically in the 20s at the Daytona road course, or just waited to pick off drivers one by one, like a Ray Alfala and a few other drivers like Keegan Leahy. In other words, I think it's going to be potentially a crazy mid-pack, especially. That could determine how the points shape out, because we talk about, yes, who's likely going to be up front, but here's the thing. You have one mistake from Zielinski, let's say off the jump, or has a problem, or the car ends up not going to his handling, or he gets lap traffic holding him up. Guess what? Someone's going to end up winning that race that's in the close battle as a result from all that shuffling still. Under 10 minutes to go on the clock, about a few more estimated laps to go, coming up to about 8 or 9 laps on the ticker.
You look at the playoff battle for the Coke Series, and Keegan Leahy and Ryan Luza will come into the playoffs with 9 playoff points by virtue of their 3 victories. Bobby Zielinski and Jimmy Mullins each have 2 wins, so they'll start on 2006 points. They got Ray Alfala with 1 win apiece. They'll go to 2003 points, and then Michael Conti and Garrett Lowe going to sit in and be square on 2000, though it's a bit of a tale of differing halves of the season. Lowe had those 4 second-place finishes through May, and then after we got to Indianapolis, he's not finished in the top 10 save for once at the plate track at Daytona. So Lowe trending down a little bit entering these playoffs. Conti, on the other hand, has had 3 of his best finishes of the year in the last 3 races. 2nd at Darlington, 5th at Las Vegas, and 8th last Tuesday night at Talladega to lock himself in. You wonder if Zielinski is a heavy favorite at the Roval, like he is. You look at a Kansas or a Texas or a Homestead and how those tracks might pan out for these folks. You look at Kansas and Texas in particular, the mile-and-a-half folks. Is there a favorite amongst that bunch to potentially get a win? Maybe a Keegan or a Ray or a Conti, perhaps?
I think all of the above is what you just said there. Code Ryan Luza, I think, too, in that grouping. As long as Luza can get the consistency that he struggled with last year's playoffs back in his hands, because there was a reason he led the most laps for the first half of the season in the number 53 machine, Williams Esports. In other words, I think a lot of teams are more focused on getting their setups together for Kansas and Texas and trying to make sure you get a good points haul when it comes to the Charlotte Roval, because You can't afford to sleep on that round if you want a championship. You can't just depend on going and taking the checkered flag because, as we've seen with Las Vegas, you run a tire set, for example, or have a big one in the pack, the whole points can completely change.
There's so much that could go sideways, and for Luza, the big thing is going to be to try and find some speed outside of the sprint. The last 2 seasons, he's rattled off victories in March and April, and yet does not have a victory outside of those 2 months in the Coke Series in, what, 2-3 years, I think, JP?
Give or take, yes. Yeah, it's going to be one where, again, I think it's going to be fun, though, when we get to Homestead, because here's the thing. Of course, that's a championship finale for this season. It's one where tradition has been always set, and as well, good battles have always been set there. It's going to be potentially a different race, though, compared to what you've seen in the past, because of the effect of dirty air, because the different lines that can come into play, especially with how setups can go. It was fairly tight, remember, for the Homestead race in the spring. I'm intrigued to see how everything jots itself on down for a race such as what race is, I should say. We expect to see come to playoffs here to see who gets the championship. In our words, this is going to go any direction.
And when we talk about Homestead, I think we'd be remiss not to look at Keegan Leahy as we approach 6 minutes to go in this race. But remember that Leahy was door-to-door with Zach Novak for the title and lost out by a hood length last year. This year, no Novak to contend with in the playoffs, and Leahy will come back with all that speed in the same package. Is this the year maybe he goes one better and gets it done, perhaps? If he can make it to Homestead, I would assume he's probably the favorite to win the title just off of his performance from a year ago with this same package that we're going to see at Homestead come November.
I would say he is one of the favorites because he has been super quick on the mile and a halves. One of the air favorites, if he can get there, is Conti, because Conti's in that same ballpark, especially what we've seen with Las Vegas. The package they both had was dead on in terms of pace, it seemed, and especially with how they hit their marks. The question mark's going to be, I think, though, how Zelensky continues on, because he has been really good. It's just a matter of winning at the ovals. Since, of course, we've talked about the road course prowess, he's been getting better and better at the ovals this year in recent months in terms of his luck there. The 4th spot, though, I think it's up in the air because we talked about the momentum and some of the drivers. It's just, again, the challenges in the closing stages as well, and some of the adversity drivers have handled and had to deal with in recent weeks that could very much test them. See, can they get the job done when the pressure is on with just 4 straight races in 4 weeks, 3 of them which can determine how the rest of your season and potentially the impact of your career for the next couple seasons at least can fare out.
You want to talk about a driver who could point their way in and be that 4th. There's a very clear and obvious candidate to me on that front, and it is Nick Ottinger in the number 25 machine, who has only finished outside of the top 10 once in the last 7 races. The 37th place at Michigan, where he got caught up in that big wreck on the front straightaway with a handful of laps to go. But outside of that, it was 3rd at New Hampshire, 3rd at Daytona, 3rd at Darlington, 3rd at Las Vegas, and then 6th at the Daytona Oval and Talladega last Tuesday night. You check on the fact that he got a top 10 in Indianapolis. That is terrifying consistency, JP. And if nothing happens, nothing crazy happens to Ottinger, I wouldn't be surprised if he's your 4th.
I wouldn't be surprised either in that being, I think really being connected with William Byron Esports this year has been helpful, because he's talked about this a couple times with me where he actually runs a lot with William Byron and talks about philosophy with him a lot. And actually they hold test sessions, so to speak, where they push each other to prepare William for the real world race and for real world competitors in terms of what he may expect, as well to help Nick prepare for the virtual side. And it's all coming together, I think, this year, because he's always had that speed on the ovals. It's just he hasn't had that luck outside the super speedways. in recent seasons for the most part. I think if he puts it all together, again for the playoffs, which I think absolutely he's got the pace to do so, to the point where he breaks through for a victory, no surprise, I think he's going to be potentially a top 10 car at the minimum at Homestead.
Could very easily, and it could start with a good points run at the Charlotte Roval, which I think is worth noting. You go back last year and see what happened at the Charlotte Roval. This was the penultimate race. Kevin Davis and Ottinger was third at the Roval at Charlotte a year ago, just like he was at the Daytona Roval back in August. So if there's a number 2 maybe behind Zelensky to get the job done next Tuesday night, that 25 car might be it. That being said, Matt Danson now down to 2 laps to go. Timer has 1:45 left on the clock, so he'll have time to complete this lap, and then the next lap will be the last one for the 30 of Matt Danson, who has controlled this race just about from the drop of the green flag. As that's a 9.8 seconds ahead of Carl Horn, and then Brandon Mckissick at third, JP.
Yeah, everyone's just gone into a smooth rhythm at this point, and the fall-off is similar to what some of the drivers have seen in official racing, about 3-4 seconds this time, because the track's much more rubbered up here. You see with those darker markings, which the rubber can slow down the amount of fall off, but also affect how the grip levels fare. A lot of drivers like it more rubbered up, let's say, even for road course racing specifically, compared to, say, a completely green racetrack, as done in real life, where you don't want a completely green racetrack, obviously, because that can potentially shred your tires for the start of a run. It's just worked exactly in Matt Danson's direction tonight, where his closest competition struggled early on, smacked the wall a couple times, DNF'd early on, and as a result, he's been able to just focus on his own marks in his own race and run away. 36 seconds on the clock.
So this should be the last lap for Matt Danson, who should walk away with victory here in the SimSeat 70, but Carl Horn 10 seconds back if anything happens. Everybody else separated by about 7 seconds and change or more. But another good point tonight for Carl Horn, too. Danson will take the accolades and the high honors for the victory, as he should, but Horn getting a P2 out of this is not to be understated in his charge for the ERL fall season title.
And especially with the bad luck for the 99 machine tonight, especially being the horrificness for Colton Salick in the bus stop tonight, that's going to be the main difference that gains him some of these points. They both talked about the championship fight through Discord as well as through voice chat, and expecting to be a tight battle throughout the season, but this gives at least Horn that breathing space he's going to be looking for here. Now, just got to make sure he takes it to the checkered flag here, as Danson has a couple more corners left.
Danson through the chicane and over the 3 and 4, and it will be a victory, and the first victory by someone outside of the United States in ERL competition will go to Melbourne, Australia's Matt Danson in the 30 machine, who brings his Chevy Camaro across the line to win the SimSeat 70 at Charlotte Motor Speedway's Roval. Victory and a burnout in the heartburn turn as well to the 30 of Matt Danson. His first ever victory in ERL competition. Parked it right in front of the camera too, so he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, really pumped up it seems, and just put on a clinic in terms of speed. Least amount of fall for any of the drivers tonight. Put up the fastest laps of the race for the most part. Connor Horde with the purple lap for the race, but in total led just about every single lap except for a couple this evening.
Waiting on Evan Rice. He's the last one to come through and complete his lap. Blake McCandless now entering the backstretch chicane. He'll have a top 5 in hand if he can keep it together through that last chicane on the racetrack, and we'll keep our eyes peeled on the final few finishers as Danson continues to burn it down over by the heartburn turn. The, I suppose, appropriate place to finish off a victory here, and we saw a pretty good celebration from Chase Elliott over here a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely, especially when you put your whole entire car into the wall and still come out away with a race win somehow. Yeah, you're going to be very pumped up in that case, and just have to make sure, oh hey, don't let your car roll away. Some of these cars, though, they're still doing spins in the grass right now, even though the race isn't over quite yet for some of them.
It is indeed, though, for everybody. Nathan Rabideau's done and dusted. Connor Horn done and dusted. And Matt Danson, your race winner. So it's time to go to your full field rundown and tell you where your favorite driver finished. Danson, your race winner over Connor Horn. Brandon McKissick finished in the 3rd position to round out the podium. You'll hear from those 3 in just a moment. Presley Sora in the 98 car finished 4th. Blake McCandless was 5th. Evan Rice in the 6th position. Colton Salek in 7th, losing those points to Connor Horn. A bit of a glass half full, glass half empty day for the 99 car. Adam de Blasio runs in 8th at the end of the evening, 9th to the 93 of Nathan Rabideau, and 10th to the 00 of Ryan Kendrick.
11th spot tonight in turn after all the craziness goes to Colton Zimmer. 4 laps down, though, is where he finishes. Everybody else parked it early on with some troubles. Dylan Basin, 15 laps down. Lucas Cram, 19 laps down. Nick Miller, 20 laps down. Brett Gardner, 23 laps down with a steering wheel issue. Hedorada with a big crash in the bus stop, 38 laps down, and then a secondary crash in the infield. Steven Rosales, 40 laps down. Kobe Wells, 41 laps down. Zach Novak from the lead had several issues where he smacked the walls. 45 laps down after parking it early on. Nick and Delcato didn't even make it a lap or so. Only 49 laps down is where he finishes. Didn't even take a qualifying lap. Him and Kendrick were the only drivers not to put in a time at the moment. Or that time, rather.
And that concludes your full field rundown as we bring in the first ever winner in ERL competition from outside of the United States. Matt Danson now joins us, and we made the point at the beginning of the broadcast that you all down in Australia have a thing for running full-bodied cars on road courses, and you do it pretty well. So this race, maybe more so than some of the others on the calendar, I have to assume felt more second nature to you than some of the ovals that we go on, even though you love the oval competition too. But did this race feel like it was going to fall into your wheelhouse the way that it did?
Gee, that's a good question. No, I've always felt stronger at the ovals, to be honest with you. But then again, the road courses are a bit more straightforward. There's less, of the unknown that can come in. Like cautions, obviously throwing spanner in the works. But so I felt more comfortable about just being able to run my own race. But I don't know. Looking at the field, obviously number of good drivers, and I was expecting guys like Jimmy and Tucker, who we didn't see tonight. To be there, and that would have made things a bit different perhaps as well. But I don't know. To answer your question, I think I probably prefer oval, but I was reasonably confident.
But then it just started clicking. Were there any points at all where you were worried just with the pit stops? We know Connor came out pretty close to you on a few occasions. Did that ever cross your mind? Did you ever really look back in the rearview mirror all that much tonight?
Yeah, always looking at the relative and seeing what's going on. Trying to assess what people might be doing. The first stop. So when Connor pit, I was expecting to go maybe another 2-3 laps because I expected to be about 51 laps, obviously with the timed event. But then he pit, and I thought, okay, that's cool. Let's just get a nice solid in lap. And then I almost dropped it in turn 2, and then almost, again as well, dropped it in the backstretch chicane. So it was probably the worst in lap you could possibly have. And then, yeah, like you said, it made it super interesting on the exit. And then the second stop, I saw Connor pit, and there was just, I was sort of umming and ahhing. I was like, is he going to catch? Probably not, but I thought there's no real reason for me to be on a contra strat. I might as well just make sure I'm doing the same thing as him. And so I pit that lap after.
And for those unaware, you are competing in Australia right now. Current local time for you is right about midday. Can you explain to everyone watching what it's like to be the lone competitor outside of North America in this series, and how different it is for you to be racing from, 9 a.m. you get into practice, and then 10 to 12 you're busy with the actual race, as opposed to the 7 to 9 in the evening that everyone here in North America is?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely not a morning person, so that's not ideal. So yeah, like you said, 9 a.m. Is sort of when they normally kick off. We've just gone into daylight saving, so like you said, it's just cracked 12 o'clock right now. Normally these races would practice, I think, opens like 8 a.m. for us, which yeah, that's suboptimal. But yeah, I guess it's honestly, I almost feel like a honorary American in many ways. I've been racing with and against you guys, I guess we'll say, for so long that yeah, it's just one and the same.
And there, we'd be remiss not to hit on the history that you make tonight too. First ERL winner outside of the U.S. and first ERL winner from Australia. What's that mean to you to tick off both of those boxes?
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, yeah, like I said, obviously, cool league. Lots of strong competition, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's always nice to get a W. Yeah, it's an honor, I guess. Yeah.
A big honor that comes from a big team and a lot of folks who helped you out, Matt. Who do you need to thank for tonight's win?
Well, I guess, yeah, obviously shout out to Horizon Racing Team. We saw my boys Seth DeMerchant and Donovan Strauss really kick some goals at the end of Road to Pro there at Phoenix. Unfortunately, I was languishing in the midfield in that race, but yes, shout out to those boys. Shout out to ERL, you guys, Podium. I'll definitely go back and watch this. It should be pretty enjoyable. And just all the competitors putting on a good race.
Well, Matt, from everybody at the Esports Racing League and Podium Esports, congratulations on your victory this evening. Thanks as always for the time to chat with us, and we look forward to seeing you at Kansas 1 week from tonight. And I'll admit, we'll look forward to watching the great race next weekend.
Thanks, mate.
Matt Danson, P1 tonight, the Australian victorious at Charlotte. We now turn to the points leader who puts in another solid finish. Connor Horn is with Justin Prince.
Yes, indeed. And Connor, with your performance tonight, you now have an 11-point buffer over Colton Salick. First things first, how difficult was this race for you as you ran top 3 all night?
Yeah, I ran top 3, but it was really tough with the setup that's on the car. The rear tires just are really tough to keep under you, and especially on that first one, that was very tough. The rear tires, you were almost having to shift into third in the road course part of it because they just slid. They didn't want to cooperate. It was really hard going into the downhill and uphill sections because of that. But able to hold on to it. Had a Novak drop out early because he really killed the right front. And that was a big part. Getting onto that 2 left-handers going onto the oval, or if you hit the right front there, you're pretty much done. So that was a tough hit for him. I thought I had a chance at Danson. I would hope he didn't have the race pace, but he definitely did. He was definitely class of the field all night to all of us. And there was a few times there where I tried to undercut him twice and just came up short both times. That was unfortunate, but I knew if I just held on to the car and didn't get too significant damage with it, I'd be able to hold on for at least second or third. And it was just really the handful to really drive all night, but I was able to keep it on track for the most part.
One thing I want to ask is, Danson mentioned with the second pit stop that he made that it was a not wanting to be on the contra strategy, quote unquote, that when you came down, you decided to put on fresh tires, lost you about 20-30 seconds, yes, but would have been 5 seconds quicker a lap, give or take, with the fall off. What came into the decision to say, you know what, I feel like I should try something different?
Well, I knew I had a big gap to the guys behind me, except for Mckissick. I feel like I could have gotten by him. I was hoping he would maybe let me by if I came out behind him, which I did. It was really, I didn't have to pit that second time. I was really just doing it just to try something different. After he passed the pit road on the lap I pit in, I pit. I was hoping to draw him in, maybe trick him into something. I wasn't trying to beat him on that set of tires. I was trying to draw him in, and I would be able to undercut him and get in front of him for that final run. So a little bit of trickery there I was trying to do, but it just barely didn't work out. Mckissick almost got ahead of him there, so that would have been interesting too if that happened. But I was just trying to toy with him a little bit, and it just didn't work out, but it was worth a try in my opinion.
For the next few races, 2.5-mile circuits, 2 short tracks to close out the season. Your thoughts on the next one at Kansas, 70 laps on the docket?
Yeah, Martinsville. Martinsville's the one I have checked on, because that's going to be a wild card. 100 laps there. Who knows what's going to happen? The whole field might wreck there, and you just got to be one of the ones who survive there. Kansas and Texas, I'm not too concerned about them, but because especially with how good of the racing was good at Vegas, I hope to expect more of the same at Kansas, although it is a one-line track on the top. It should be interesting. And Texas is very tough with the banking and all of that, and how you kind of have to go full throttle 3 and 4 to keep up. I'm not too concerned about Phoenix. I love Martinsville and Phoenix, but I'm definitely more concerned about Martinsville because of just the wild card factor of it. But I feel like I can still muster up some good, solid top 5 runs. If I'm able to do that, I could probably almost hold on here for the last few races. So getting a second run here, a second place here, is pretty big. So hopefully I can do more of the same coming up to the end of the season.
Anyone you want to thank before I let you go?
Jeremy Miller, got to thank him. He spotted me tonight. He actually was the one who called me in to try to undercut Dance and maybe trick him into pit road. So that was a big call by him. Just didn't work out, but he did a great job on the box and spotted me today. Brandon Mckissick, he was letting me go when I got to him, so he was fun racing with. And Bearded Sim Racer, obviously got Top Flight PCs on the car. Shout out to them for being on the truck. So look back on the car, excuse me. Really cool. I can keep getting some good finishes with him, and just really happy that I'm able to get try to extend my points lead a little bit.
Congratulations on the run tonight, and we'll see how you do come next week at Kansas. Expect to be a wild one.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Appreciate you. I appreciate you too, James.
Again, that's Connor Horn, P2 tonight. James, back over to you.
Connor Horn, P2. It's Brandon Mckissick, P3. Best finish for Mckissick in a while here in the ERL. And Brandon, just take us through how wild it was, especially staying out. You were one of the few to attempt the one-stop strategy. So, first off, why the 1 over the 2 or perhaps the 3 that we saw most of this field take?
Well, first off, I didn't realize how much it fell off because I'd never done a race in the Cup car here before until now. But I had no idea the fall off was like 7 seconds, which was really bad. However, I was fully committed to the one-stop strategy, so therefore I didn't have the confidence to go back and do 2 stops when I already have split the run down the middle. And I was also worried about getting back in traffic and getting potentially wrecked or maybe like more damage from a solar car or something like that. So I just wanted to keep my track position in a clean track with nobody around me and just try to see what splitting the middle could do since I was already committed to that.
It's about splitting the middle and then basically backing up any traffic behind you. Then in that case, when you short pit, it's not necessarily a matter of driving through traffic so much as it is holding off the people behind you. And it played out in your favor. Top 3 gets you a good leg up onto Kansas, which is a little bit more in your wheelhouse. Traditionally, mile and a half hasn't been the strong suit. So to get ready for Kansas and Texas, 2 of them coming up back-to-back here, how excited are you to head to the Midwest next week?
I'm looking forward to Kansas. I usually do well there. Looking forward to see how maybe the middle would work next week during the race. But I'm mostly looking forward to Texas. It's a very fun track in my opinion. Like the way the corners work with how unique they are on both ends, the throttle time differential, things like that. So I am looking forward to the next 2 weeks to go back to mile and a halves, which I feel like are my best tracks on the schedule. So definitely looking forward to it.
I know there are plenty of people you need to thank for tonight's run, so who do you need to send your shout-outs to?
First off, I'd like to thank Anthony Alfredo for putting on this league. I'd like to thank you guys for putting on the broadcast, my team and Nexus Esports and everybody who's a part of that, and Connor Horn for hanging out with me during the race and helping me out a little bit.
Brandon, from everyone at the ERL at Podium Esports, congratulations on your podium finish, and we look forward to seeing you in Kansas next Wednesday night.
Yep, thank you.
Brandon Mckissick P3 this evening, JP, and we start looking towards Kansas. It's mile and a half madness for the next 2 weeks to set us up for Martinsville and then Phoenix, the final mile and a half of the season, and a big night for Connor Horn. He's got breathing room if anything crazy happens in Kansas or Texas over the next 2 weeks. How big is that? Do you have a sense of how important that's going to be to the 67 as we go through the ERL season finale?
I think it's going to be very big because The mile and a half this season have been fairly unpredictable, believe it or not, with how things have shaped out, especially how tracks have flowed on the circuit. The main thing is, though, outside of Las Vegas, this is just the second time, this is in total for Kansas, the second time we've gone to a cookie cutter track, James, this season for the mile and a halves. A lot of the races this season have been short tracks, road courses, even different types of mile and a half or around that range circuits. In other words, it's going to be crucial for Korn to capitalize on that buffer, because he gets into trouble like we've seen at Las Vegas a few weeks back in the early stages. That's going to be potentially the difference in the championship because of how important the next two races especially are going to be.
Don't think we need to add much more to it. It's big time racing in Kansas. Next Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on twitch.tv/ERL Racing, or Anthony Alfredo's Facebook page or YouTube page, or the ERL Twitter for that matter. All places where you can catch the 10th round of the ERL season as we continue our journey towards Phoenix and figuring out who the champion of the fall season for the Esports Racing League presented by SimSeats is going to be. Before we get to the action next Wednesday, though, a few events to tell you about that'll come up within the week in the world of iRacing and Podium Esports. First up, Forza Club of America Sim Racing is back in action from Suzuka Circuits. First race in Asia for PCA Sim Racing in the Cayman GT4s as round 6 of Series 5 comes your way this Friday night, October 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the PCA Sim Racing YouTube channel. Before Monday night, we return to the Roval here at Charlotte Motor Speedway for the Nemesis Lab 114 for the Sim 500 Trans Service Cup Series. That broadcast begins at 9 p.m. Eastern next Monday night, October 12th, on the Podium Esports Twitch channel. Then next Tuesday night, it's the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. The playoffs begin for the Roval at Charlotte Motor Speedway, 9 p.m. Eastern Time next Tuesday night, October 15th on iRacing's Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube channels, as you'll see Leahy, Luza, Zelensky, Mullis, Ottinger, Alfala, Conti, and Lowe begin their fight for the 2020 eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series Championship. Before we're back on air next Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, October 14th, Kansas Speedway. The place will be ERL_Racing on Twitch, the place you can see all of the action. Time for us to round out our broadcast from the Roval at Charlotte Motor Speedway. So for Cisco Scaramouza, Gary Sexton, and John Theodore at Podium Esports, for Anthony Alfredo, Chris Mulhall, Zach Johnson, and Josh Mendoza at the Esports Racing League, for my colleague in the booth, Justin Prince, and for our producer, powered by Top Flight Computers, Ryan Bauer, I am James Pike, the voice of Podium Esports. Thank you so much for watching our broadcast, the Esports Racing League presented by SimSeats. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday night from Kansas Speedway.